So let me show you what preferences are available in CC 2019. And this is actually the reason that I kind of put this off, and I don't really want to show you, but it's still necessary. They change every few versions, and so this is going to be outdated pretty quickly, and if you happen to have an older version that you really like, it may not match up at all. But I'm going to do some adjustments to how my system behaves, so in order for you to know what that is, I'm going to go ahead and show you while I do it. So underneath Edit, Preferences, and General, you'll have a few options that relate directly to the smart object and whether or not it's created and all that. So if just on this first tab under General, you have the option to skip transform when placing. And what that means is that it will stop the free transform that occurs when you're placing it. I want to skip that. Resize the image during place. I do not like this option at all. This should not be default. This takes control away from the graphic artist when they're placing objects in. It makes it difficult for them to determine what the size of the object actually is. So I'm going to turn that off. And always create smart objects when placing. I'm also not a big fan of this simply because the object that is created is the same file type as the object that was dragged in. So in other words, if you moved a JPEG in at the time that you were working on your document, it would be a JPEG type inside of that smart object. So you know how every time I did an edit after I opened up a smart object in the PSB file format, it would say save and then move on? This is problematic if it's a JPEG and you do something like add on new layers. The JPEG format does not support additional layers, and the whole thing becomes a rabbit hole of where it's going, how it's imported, all kinds of problems. It's generally a bad idea to leave this on as well. So I'm going to turn that off. And so these are my new settings. I am going to skip the transform when placing. I am not going to resize the image automatically during placing, and I'm not going to create a smart object when placing. This means that my system will now behave as though I've opened the file in a new tab and have moved it over whenever I place an object. And really that's the behavior that I would want by default, simply because it does the least automatic adjustments without my input. So in other words, I have control over what's going on in my system. Now, if you're working in the MJC East Computer Graphics Lab, the Magic Lab, you can change these settings, but keep in mind that they will reset when the computers restart because they have what's called deep freeze. Deep freeze will restore the computer back to a specific set of settings, and one of those settings includes having Photoshop be essentially a freshly set up installation. For home users though, this is fine. This will stay until you clear out your preferences. And again, if you're on a PC and you do need to clear out your preferences because Photoshop's acting buggy, the fastest way to do that is to hold down Control Shift and Alt while opening Photoshop. If you're on a Macintosh, that's Option, Command, and Shift when you open Photoshop. That will allow you to clear it out. All right, so hopefully this lets you know why my Photoshop's going to be behaving differently from here on out. So hopefully you didn't skip this video, wonder what happened, and then came back to it. All right, let's take a quick look at how linked objects work and why we're not going to use them in this class, even though they're a very, very useful process in Photoshop. See you in the next video.